I'm Spencer Bailey. This is Time Sensitive. Hey everyone, on this week's episode, I'm joined in the studio by the Japanese photographer, artist, and architect Hiroshi Sugimoto. When it comes to the subject of time, Hiroshi is really one of the most profound minds and practitioners around. In so many respects, I consider him to be an ancient among us mere mortals. As the art critic Roberta Smith once wrote in the New York Times, his photographs have stretched and reshaped the concepts of time, space, and light endemic to the medium. And in the process, they have altered our grasp of history, visual perception, and existence itself. Practicing photography now for nearly 5 decades, Hiroshi began in 1976 with his ongoing dioramas series, in which he photographs the displays inside natural history museums, making them feel all the more real in the process, as if he had actually been there in, say, the Neolithic period. Shortly after, he also began his theater series of pictures, in which he brings a 4x5 camera into an old American movie house, a drive-in, or an abandoned theater, and opens the camera shutter to expose the film for the duration of an entire feature-length movie, with the film projector serving as the only light source. In 1980, he started what may be his most widely recognized body of work, called Seascapes. These incredible Rothko-esque abstractions of the sea that he has since taken at roughly 250 locations around the world, from the Arctic Ocean to Positano, Italy, to the German island of Rügen in the Baltic Sea. In more recent years, Sugimoto has also built a practice as an architect, designing everything from a Tokyo cafe to the soon-to-open Hirshhorn Sculpture Garden in Washington, D.C. His most notable architectural effort, his life work really, is the Inura Observatory in Odawara, Japan, a sort of Judd in Marfa type setting, but in this case, Sugimoto in Japan. That features a gallery, a tea house, various outdoor stages and platforms, and gardens. Whenever I look at Hiroshi's work, time practically stops for me, and time really is the centralmost element of all that he does. Not surprisingly, the word time has been included in the title of many of his exhibitions and books, including Time Machine, Stop Time, Time Exposed, and Architecture of Time. For me, with this interview, more than most, I'd say, time nearly seemed to come to a standstill. As with his work, Hiroshi bears tremendous wisdom and has the quiet power of a true sensei. Before we get into the episode, I'd first like to thank our Season 9 presenting sponsor, L'École, School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef and Arpels. With permanent campuses in Paris and Hong Kong, Shanghai and Dubai, as well as various traveling schools, L'École focuses on 3 primary areas: savoir-faire, the history of jewelry, and gemstones. Classes on subjects ranging from art history to introductory jewelry making are taught by a group of 60-some teachers, art historians, gemologists, jewelers, and artisans, all of them experts in their fields. Among L'École's newest offerings is the podcast Voice of Jewels. Through a combination of narration and insights from art historians, jewelry experts, and L'École lecturers, each episode delves into the stories and secrets behind history's most fascinating jewels. From Rihanna's grills to a necklace that once belonged to Louis XV's favorite mistress, to the legendary Blue Diamond. Available in both English and French, Voice of Jewels is narrated by the award-winning actor Edoardo Ballerini. Season 1, titled Sentimental Jewels, and Season 2, titled The Blue Diamond's 1001 Lives, are now available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can learn more about L'École and Voice of Jewels at www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.lecolevancleefarpels.com. And now, here's my conversation with Hiroshi. Hi, Hiroshi. Welcome to Time Sensitive.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So I feel like if we're going to talk time, we have to start with fossils.
Oh, fossils.
That seems to be the most maybe obvious place to start with you. particularly because you have this incredible collection of fossils, pottery shards, hand axes, other Stone Age objects. You've described fossils as pre-photography time recording devices, a term I love.
Right.
Could you elaborate on this sort of fossil time? How do you think about fossils through time?
Well, it's definitely it's recording the time, the history of, actually history of the time. When you find a stone and break it and open it, one side is negative, one side is positive. It's clearly the record of millions of years ago. So this is the beginning of our life formation on the planet Earth. And I'm very curious about the history itself, my personal history, human history, and the history of life, how it started, and why only human being became the human being. We have consciousness, we have a mind, but no other animals have this kind of consciousness. And then probably the gaining the sense of time is a starting point of human consciousness. So I decided to use a camera to study my curiosity, because the camera is actually works as a time machine for me, going backwards in time to study what's happened in the past.
You've talked about photography as a process of making fossils out of the present.
Right.
And your photographs are durational in the sense that you follow these series over long periods of time, but you're also taking pictures across time. Sometimes it's a 20-minute exposure, sometimes 40-minute exposure.
Yeah. Sometimes 2 hours exposure for the duration of the film. People watch the movie as a kind of storytelling, and then every single the movies always end up with white light to bring it back to the origin of the white light. So it seems like a life for every single people. We came from somewhere and we disappearing to somewhere, and life is in between.
Would you say fossils in that sense are like the world's slowest photographs?
Slowest, maybe longest photograph. No, that's necessarily the long time exposure. I do quite normal short time photography. Like my seascapes is very standard. The shutter speed is usually 125 or 250s, but it's sometimes I stop time. Sometimes I just the time to let it go and then see what's appeared on my film.
Before we leave fossils, I just have to ask you about your collection. How did you begin collecting these fossils? What led you down this path of amassing and building this collection?
Yes, I'm thinking about my camera as a fossilization at the time. So it came from my kind of concept or words. And then I intentionally started to pay attention to where I can buy it from. And then I found a very funny auctioneer in California. They used to do a twice big auction, quite local. And I found it, and they kept sending me a catalog. So I didn't have time to fly to California, but just through the catalog. About maybe 20 years ago I started. And then that time I was able to buy quite a museum quality, huge fossils. But it's gone. I cannot find any more. So I was in a good time. And then very early stage of trilobite, at the beginning of the life, through the like a step by step approaching to our current time, and so I can visualize my concept, my time touching the fossils. And then after start collecting the fossils, I start collecting Stone Age tools. Old Stone Age, New Stone Age. The human became human from kind of animal state. And then what they started to make as a tools that separate the human from the ape state or animal state. And then touching those tools, I just, through my skin, I just remember, wow, yes, that was it. That happened. The feeling through my feeling of skin.
It's like time travel.
Yes. I just feel clearly what was a human being felt like. You making tools. And then so easy, it's fit your palm. And then you can cut the nut, break the nuts, cut the tree. Just trace back my memory, not as a personal memory, but human as whole.
And in some sense, that spirit, that feeling of what it's like when you hold a hand axe, for example, do you seek to try to achieve some of that through photography, that feeling?
Yes. So I reflect back my memory, and then I even take photographs of the dioramas, and American Natural History Museum, they have a series of diorama of early humans. I have some pictures here, especially Lucy.
The Lucy photograph, yeah.
Lucy photograph. They used to have a diorama of Lucy, but no longer, because every time the scholars find a new fact, this was wrong, this is a new theory, and then they make a new one. But after 10 years, something new theory comes, so they have to change. So it's just the estimation of many stories of origins of human, which is interesting.
More generally, if we're talking from a pastime perspective, how do you think about the history of photography, this 200-year-long journey, Louis Daguerre, Henry Fox Talbot? How do you place what you do in that context?
Yes, I owe them two persons. That was 1839, announcement photography, and then Fox Talbot followed. Actually, Talbot's mother was surprised. Wow, this is my boy's invention, and the French guy is trying to steal him. But yeah, I think the invention of photography is as great as invention of types or letters. Humans start writing and making record. And then also the invention of painting is prior to the letter, I think. But that kind of big stage of change of the human history, that since the photography invented, it used to be a painter's job to paint the history, like a Napoleon riding on a white horse and crossing over the Alps. That's the only way to record, the visual record of history. But the photography invented, photography believed that never be fantasize the history. It's not a fantasy, it's a record of reality. But now no longer applied, because the digital photography, it can be changed. So only the 170, 80 years, the police decided to use as a proof of the fact. But the police is no longer using as evidence, as a photography. So this particular time, I think it's a serious photography practice time.
The photograph is so omnipresent now in our lives. Did you ever imagine it would be like this?
No, the people carrying the iPhone and every meal that people photograph and send it. That's amazing.
I think part of this conversation has to do with ancestral thinking too. And I think that there's sort of this idea of ancestors embedded in your work. Could you maybe speak a little bit to that? How do you think about the ancestral line of...
Ancestral lines. Well, I trace back my personal memory, and then I came to the image of seascapes when I was a child. And then more and more I get involved with the image of the seascapes. I felt like I'm feeling it through not my memory, but the memory behind my memory. It's probably memory of my blood. I can trace back my memories of my parents, memories of grandparents, and in hundreds different ancestors' stages. And maybe I came to think about what would be the feeling of being a first man appeared on this planet Earth. I imagined this person must be watching the seascapes, and then all of a sudden realize, well, I'm here, who I am. So this kind of ancestral memory that I came to me finally, and then I decided to photograph the seascape. Supposedly I'm the first man to be standing and facing the ocean. And then I can share this image with this ancestral image and the contemporary man, because seascapes might be least changed in the world. The ground, we touched it, we destroyed it, we changed it.
Yeah, there's this sort of idea of recurring time. The water's always lapping back. It's always,
Right.
I was actually personally really taken with that work when I realized my own family history, which there's a line of ancestors in my family who come from the island of Rügen, where I know,
Rügen.
yeah, where I know that you photographed in the Baltic Sea. So when I saw your Rügen photographs, I was imagining my ancestors looking at the sea.
That was intentionally I was thinking about Rügen because of the Caspar David Friedrich, the German Romanticism painter, who painted the Rügen Island and gave me a very strong impression. So I went to see and went to find where this exact spot he painted, and I think I found it. Avoiding the chalk cliff on the both sides, I just focus on the seascapes between the chalk cliff.
Tell me a bit more about the seascapes, and I want to get into some of your other series too, some of which you've been now continuing for nearly 50 years, which is remarkable. From the seascapes perspective, you've, from what I understand, photographed in more than 200 locations around the world.
Yeah, 200, 250. Well, it's depends how you count. On the same shore, different point, every morning is different. But I just kept moving around. And quite intentionally, sometimes think about the direction of the sun is easy, but the moon, how big moon it can be on this particular day, and which direction the moon shows up. This is a kind of 24 hours operation. I do a night seascapes, day seascapes, morning seascapes. Always I'm calculating where should I be on what time or what day. So it's quite busy.
Yeah, and what do you make of all this time you've spent looking at the sea?
Well, it's never get tired of it. Mostly the waiting time. When it's raining, then I just have nothing to do. So I always bring many, many books to read, and I enjoy reading. And probably the best chance is a few hours before the sunrise. and then the sky you feel the lights, the presence of the lights, and very quiet, no human activities, and then slowly the center part of the sky get brighter and brighter, and the surface of the sea reflects this first light of the day. This is most mysterious time for me. So I usually wake up very early, like before the sun. So when I feel the lights is there, I just bring my camera out and set my camera. I'm ready to receive the message. So it's a very nice, quiet moment, and listening into the birds start singing, and the wind is it's just so kind of meditative. I feel usually just by myself. So I just pay my attention myself. I'm almost not like a chanting, but I have expectancy of something might be happen. I can feel it. So I just wait my camera open, not the shutter open, but the camera is ready to receive anything. My mind is ready to receive. And then sometimes miracle happens. I think I'm very lucky. It's very rare to get the good photographs of seascapes. People think, wow, seascapes, well, I can do it. Of course we can do it. Please do it. And just copy me if you can.
Hey everyone, taking a quick break here to tell you a little bit about our Season 9 presenting sponsor, L'École, School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef and Arpels. Since establishing its first 2 campuses in Paris and Hong Kong, L'École recently opened new campuses in Shanghai and Dubai as part of its aim to spread the knowledge of jewelry art and culture to as many people around the world as possible. Both campuses offer free exhibitions and will eventually provide classes and in-person lectures by art historians, gemologists, jewelers, and craftspeople. Housed in the Twin Villas on Middle Huaihai Road and spread over nearly 22,000 square feet, the Shanghai School is the largest school of jewelry arts in the world. You can learn more about L'École and its current and upcoming offerings at www.l'ecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.l'ecolevancleefarpels.com. And now, back to the episode. Yeah, this waiting time is so interesting to me, and I imagine there's also the time to journey to the edge to take these pictures.
Right. Well, I have to avoid any kind of human presence. If there's a leisure boat or fishing boat, I can't do it. So I end up just try to go to place as remote as possible, so that I don't see any other people. And someday I went to edge by the Red Sea coast. I rented the car in Cairo. I was told that you have a driver together with car. I said, no, I don't need a driver. They said it's the same price. So I just rent a car, drove myself. But the car is so junky, so it's very hard to keep it control. But through the driving, all the courses, mined, the explosives. So very few places that I can go to the beach or seashore. That was a beautiful Red Sea. I was wondering why it's called Red Sea. I still don't have an answer, but the most remote, quiet place. And then always I encounter German people living at the edge of the human civilization. Probably it's a German romanticism that the German people want to live somewhere very remote places. So I rented a tent through this last German camp, and That was beautiful. I even dive in the coral of the sea. It was, well, the best ever I remember, the quality of the water.
This was in the Red Sea you're talking about?
Let's see, yes.
I imagine that it's become harder to find these kinds of places where it's so remote and there's no human
even
activity.
I go back to the same place, it's changed. The human, I think, the quality of the nature, we keep changing it, destroying it. So I was probably last person to be able to photograph seascapes. No longer. I quit. Except one day a year, very particular day, I established my own art foundation in Odawara, which is 1 hour from Tokyo, and it's open to the sea, January 1st, morning. So no activities. Everybody take a break. So this is the only
day you can take.
I am able to take a seascapes.
There's a quote I wanted to bring up here that you've said about your seascapes, which is, "Time crosses the seas to wash up on the shore of ideas, whereupon ideas become the beach of equations."
Beach of equation.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like this idea of this recurring time, but it feels to me like that endless return is impossible with all the human interference and the boats.
Well, even without the human presence, I studied some kind of numbers of physics that every year, 0.00017 second, the time is longer 1 year. So since the creation of this solar system, 1 year is 365 days, but it's like a spinning the Earth, so slowly down. So there's time people think it's very solid, fixed. 1 hour is 1 hour, but actually hour later, 1 hour is little longer than 1 hour. We are living as a human presence compared to the history of the life formation or the history of the solar system. We just happen to be here for a very, very short moment. And like a dinosaurs existed for a few million years. Human being, well, think about it. It's like a 5,000 years in Egyptian time, and Jesus Christ 2,000 years. This is extremely short, I think. And Industrial Revolution 200 years ago, we started it. And we changed it so much within 200 years. Now we're probably no longer able to even live in these circumstances. Everything's happening so quickly. I may be very happy to see how it's end, the human civilization itself. Within my life, if this happened, I'm very happy to witness it.
I mean, it makes me think, a decade ago, you had this exhibition at the Palais de Tokyo that got into this. You were envisioning some of the
story of how we end our civilization, 33 case study. That was only, 10 years ago?
Yeah, 10 years ago.
But now, many of my guesses actually start happening.
Like what? What are some of them?
Like what the one of the most stupid thing was, the story was, we are shooting up so many satellites, and so it's a debris from satellite. We cannot no longer go out through these layers of satellite debris, getting more and more dangerous. And then the people start living in the satellite, the way they process poo-poo and pee-pee. And then Saturn, there's rings of human, debris. Those stupid stories. It may be, we feel the reality,
I mean, these end times, you've talked about them through a stopping time perspective. You've said the day when mankind will realize its deep-seated desire to bring time to a stop is coming inexorably closer, more or less what you just said, and time exists only through the agency of human perception.
Yes. Well, no other animals maybe physically feels, but intentionally conscious about time. So it's very abstract, the sense of time, but definitely sense of time. And probably early humans get the sense of time and then realize the sun is coming up from east and going back to west and it's circulating. And then also the sense of the seasons, spring, winter, and then come back. So we seed the plants and wait for 6 months, and then it's grown so we can crop it. This is a civilization, yes. We make a trap for animals and wait, and then we get the catch of something. This is a sense of time. So we forecast the future, and then something wait to happen. This is a kind of imagination for the future. That's the sense of the time.
It's a hallucination almost.
Very hallucinogenic of the desire or wish. Yes.
Would you say that in some sense, not every sense, but in some sense, that time will stop when humanity ends?
Humanity ends and nobody pay attention to the time.
Well, this is sort of a fun segue, I suppose, into your dioramas project, which is really a way of, it's like taking a photo of frozen time already. So it's sort of stopping time twice.
Right, double frozen.
And you've been making these pictures since 1976. You've gone back to New York's American Museum of Natural History, 1976, 1980, 1994, 1997, and 2012.
Oh, 5 times already?
Yeah, 5 times. Tell me about these visits to the museum with your camera and what you've learned along the way.
Well, first one was I was just visiting as a tourist, so I had a 35mm Nikon camera, a single lens reflex, and then I saw this polar bear first. And then that time, I was a year of 24 or 5, I had a hallucinogenic visions, not under the drug, but from my, that time very popular, LSD and everything, but very serious. My childhood, I used to see the visions and very hallucinogenic. It's very strange. I was looking at the ceiling was a wooden ceiling with many nuts there. I just look at, I'm in a bed and can't sleep and looking at the nuts of the wood. The nuts is getting bigger and bigger and then just flips me in. And that's a totally different world. So it was scary, but I enjoyed it just to let it happen. My vision changes. I became like a child with this kind of vision that the reality itself is so fakely made up. This is just the very thin layers of my vision. There's no solidness, no solid the vision. It's like a movie projection. It's a fantasy only being shown as a fake vision. So to me, there was no solid reality at all. So when I saw this diorama, well, this is exactly what I always see it. It's very thin and fake, and then maybe I can make it look like live, fictional vision, but so real. And I closed one eye, and I imitated myself as a single lens camera. Cameras has always one lens, and the human has two lenses, so that measure the distance with two lenses. But the camera has only one lens. So when I close my one eye, then I lose my sense of distance. That even gives reality. So once it's anything photographed, people tend to believe it. It's a photography. It's a sign of existence. I can use this technique to, even after twice frozen, bring the dead back to the reality. I was quite philosophically thinking, I was thinking the theory. So let's try it and use the highest quality camera ever being used, which is 8x10 camera, which I can test it. But how can you prove that this is what I want to do, and will help me to let me in to test my idea? I cannot convince any museum people that time. So I just called up the museum. I just asked, well, I'm a tourist and I want to bring my camera in. Can I able to photograph it? They said, well, of course, yes. So I have approval. So I brought in just by myself with a huge 8x10 camera and then cut the reflection with the black tent. Of course, the security came. Are you have a permission? And said, of course, I have. So this guy trusted me. So I was quite lucky. I was probably easy to be kicked out with this huge production. So I was able to take 3 pictures. Amazingly, the way I imagined is exactly what's happened. First one was a polar bear. Looks so real. People can believe, wow, you are the nature photographer.
National Geographic.
Yeah, so close. You are so brave.
Well, the close part's true.
Yes. It's only like a few, like 4 or 5 feet away with wide-angle camera lens.
Hey everyone, taking another quick break here to tell you about our weekly newsletter, where I share a behind-the-scenes look into each time-sensitive episode and also get into various things in the cultural sphere I'm paying attention to. You can sign up and join our 11,000 plus other subscribers by going to slowdown.media/newsletter. That's slowdown.media/newsletter. And now, back to the episode. Well, I think it's interesting that you mention this term fake vision, because I think in a way, so much of your work is playing with that. What's real, what's fake. And the next project, or projects really, were theaters and seascapes. And the theaters, of course, were where you would photograph entire films in a single long exposure.
Right.
These films, of course, that became a part of the public, national, sometimes international consciousness.
Right.
What was it like for you to play with the idea of vision through the theater series?
This was also the start of my imagination. I always ask myself, what if? So that particular night question was, what if I photographed the entire movie? Then the answer came to me as a vision. It must be the white screens, brilliant screens, overexposed technically. Then just all the images becomes white light, quite shining white light, and then lit the entire inside of the interior of the theater. So I envision it's like, somewhere from upstairs just came to me. It's just even the kind of religious kind of feeling I felt. So next stage is to make it happen. Usually photographers go out and hang around and shoot so many things, but mine is to make it happen, my vision.
You're almost seeing it before you make it.
I've seen it. So I went to the cheapest movie theater, St. Mark's Cinema on the 8th Street and 3rd Avenue. It's no longer there. It's a $1 theater. It used to be. So I sneak in with my 8x10 camera and I set it from the corner because the center part, there's a projection room. The guy is watching me, so I have to hide myself. And then there's no way for the exposure, 8x10 camera and 160 millimeter, quite wide angle lens. The f-stop are just wide open. f16, that's not so bright lens for the 8x10. And then I don't remember the movie at all because I wasn't watching it. I just keep hiding the screen so that I can be able to see the other detail. And then process it night, and it just shows up. The vision that I envisioned. So I was amazed myself. If I get at least one sample, I can show it to the movie owners. This is what I want to do. So getting easier and easier. And I contacted United Artists Group that time, the movie theater chain. And then I discussed with the manager, and no, you cannot do it because we have a copyright of the movie. I explained, there's no problem. No image shows up. It's just a white light. And I was able to convince this manager. So that's it started. Now I can place my camera where I wish to be in the center. And then I gave them the first copy of the prints, 20 by 24, maybe 5, 6, 7 theaters. I remember none of them, they kept it in a good condition. They just pinned up on the wall.
Like a celebrity photo or something.
Yes. I saw one time that they put the phone numbers on the screen. It might be valuable now if I can be able to find it.
Well, it's so interesting to me that technically speaking, film is hundreds of thousands of still images, and you're capturing just this one, and the one that you capture ends up effectively creating a void. You're almost staring into this void of Hollywood culture, which is fascinating.
The movie was invented after the photography invention. It's just a series of chains of the single images accumulated, and it gives the illusion of movement. So it's, again, double killed, twice frozen.
And this project evolved into effectively 3 other series. You had the abandoned theaters,
yes,
the opera houses, which is a little different but connected, and drive-in theaters.
Drive-in theater, yes.
So now that you've been making these pictures for these 5 decades, what do you make of the time you've spent in these theaters and watching these films and capturing these spaces and images? Yeah.
Well, again, it's the early stages, very, very difficult to get the good images. And 4 or 5 years, I studied what sometimes it's not sharp, even though the focus is quite focused. What happened is the temperature changes within film packed outside the theater, bring it in, and it's usually warmer. Film moves within the film holder. And so I have to make a special film folder to tape it onto the holder. It took 4 or 5 years to discover. So it's getting better and better. And also the exposure, you cannot use the exposure meter. So I have to guess how bright this movie was. Psychological movie, or there's a movie, very dark movies, and sometimes the Western movie, a cowboy movie, mostly shot outside. This gives me more exposure, which means smaller f-stop. I get sharper images. And then finally, I try to get the architecture floor plan of the theater. The usually theater is a rounded shape, and then I just measure the walls and distance from the screens, and decide my camera position, where can be kind of equidistant position, which means I get the sharpness everywhere. So it's many factors and many discoveries. Maybe after 10 years, I'm almost the best position I can find, and guessing ability of the movie's brightness. The problem is that most of the movie theater changes every show. You have like 4 or 5 different kinds. Even I take one exposure, but the next movie is dark movie, then I have to wait next day for the same movie, and it's not easy. I was very, very patient.
You mentioned this sort of religious feeling earlier when you were talking about
Yeah,
and I was thinking about how on some level there is a sacredness or a religiosity to so much of your work. Do you see it that way at all?
Well, I hope to see it, but I was wondering whether I'm religious or not. I think I'm quite religious in a sense, but I think I'm a spiritual, and some kind of spirits keep descending on me. So I just followed by the voice of some spirits. It's coming from deep inside of me or deep outside of somewhere. I don't know. I think I am a capacity to receive the message from somewhere. Then they tell me what to do, and I follow the order. This can be religious, I think. Ancient people probably be able to listen to the voice of the God, and then they follow. I'm reading the Greek poet and the Romans, they always paying attention to the message coming from somewhere. And then they just act according to the message. So there used to be no human willness. The human will is quite recent, the last maybe 1,000 years or 2,000 years. So I don't trust myself as an artist. I'm artist. I'm like a god. I can create from nothing. No, I'm waiting for the message. I'm only the tools to be acted according
You're channeling.
Yeah, I'm channeling. God invisible hand. I'm just a God invisible hand.
I also wanted to talk about your architecture series here, which started in 1997, where you abstract or really blur these,
Right.
if I could call them that, iconic pieces of architecture, whether the Brooklyn Bridge, the Chrysler Building, the Seagram Building, World Trade Center even. Where does time come into it for you with these pictures? And there's a sort of, at least how I see it, a timelessness that is evoked by taking these iconic forms and abstracting them, blurring them.
Right. This is the first commissioned work. I never received the commissioned work because I don't want to work for someone's idea. But this is the MoCA, I remember. They were planning to have 20th century architectures. At the time of probably end of the century, they wanted to see what was it in the 20th century. Right. So
1997. This is the 1997. This is the exact year that Frank Gehry's Bilbao was unveiled. It was a very pivotal moment in architecture.
I was I decided to take this job. And I was particularly questioning is what was it? What was the modernist movement of especially architecture? So I traveled around the world and picking of the most famous one, Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe. And then I decided to give, again, the theory comes first. So I came up with the theory. The concept is twice infinity. This is impossible focal point. I can go beyond the infinity because of my 8x10 camera has no stop at the infinity. The infinity means if you use 300 millimeter camera, the space between lens and film must be 300 millimeter. Then that's the infinity point. But what if I just place it instead of 300 millimeter, 150 millimeter? That's supposedly the twice the infinity point, which is not in this world, it's somewhere else. Automatically, it gives me out of focus picture. And then I think about the architecture's imagination. Architects usually probably imagine the ideal shape of the building before actual building has been built. Then architect is fighting with the reality, the budget and then client's demand. So the actual building is usually less interesting than his imagination. So to give the twice as infinity focal point, it brings back the most ideal state of the shape of architects. That's very ironic. It can be an ironical statement, and it might be even more beautiful than the finished building. That was my concept.
Yeah, there's the dreamlike. It's almost dreamlike aspect.
Yes, so especially the World Trade Center, that building wasn't so well received from the historians of architecture, but I like it. I loved it. That was only 2-3 years ago, 1998. I was able to photograph. I rented the suite room, top floor of Hilton Hotel, just across. So, which was a 50-story high. And this is 110-story. So I was in the center in between the 110s and 50s. Beautiful angle.
Obviously 9/11 happens.
9/11 happened.
What's it like for you to look at those pictures now?
It turned out to be very ghostly picture. It actually became a ghost. And I was watching the tower is just crashing in front of my eye. My studio is on the 26th Street. I went outside on the roof and watching the two buildings burning, and all of a sudden it's crushed. So, well, this is something, the turning point of history, I think.
I think your pictures become all the more poignant in that sense. You look at the Leaning Tower of Pisa or the Eiffel Tower, and you almost imagine a world without them. There is a ghostly presence.
Yes. And I photographed the new one, but not as elegant as before. So that was a turning point. We are declining. It's just going downwards now.
Well, I think we should mention while we have the time that you also practice as an architect.
Yes, it's very ironical.
and I like the ironic name of your firm, New Material Research Laboratory,
Right.
which you run with Tomoyuki Sakakida.
Sakakida, yes.
And you've said, what I aim to achieve in architecture is not deterioration and degradation, but simply for plain materials to reveal through the passage of time a more sublime fact with a more lustrous patina.
Yes.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yes, so I became a collector of antiquities, especially Japanese Shintoism and Buddhist sculpture. So in that sense, I'm tracing back my memory and the architectural point of view. The old building, Buddhist temples, the wooden structure, even from the 8th century, this remained beautifully patinated, and then the structure was simple, but the simple is better. This is a modernist kind of concept. I collected the fragment of old buildings, sometimes old pillars from 8th century, 9th century, 10th century, and it's painted once and then beautifully peeling off, and it just shows the passage of time of thousands of years. And the walls, the stucco walls, of course it's more beautiful than just a paint on a sheetrock. And more I get going backwards to recreate the craftsman. No, I can still find the craftsmen with stucco and carpenters, but now it's almost disappearing. It's endangered species. People don't pay much attention or pay money. Easier to paint rather than just making stucco walls. So I felt, well, this is an endangered species. I want to work together. I want to save them and continue the technique. So I established my architectural firm. I had no intention to be an architect, but since I commissioned the renovation of Shinto shrine in Naoshima, the Venice Island, that was 2001 I commissioned and start working 2002, spend a few years and using all the material. This was a 19th century Shinto shrine, but still, to make it refurbished, I add my own structures. I was quite pleased to be able to do that. And since then, a friend of mine started asking me, well, will you design my space? Will you design my garden? I just started doing it as a kind of hobby, side job. But the project was getting bigger and bigger. Finally, I was commissioned to do one small museum. And then the general contractor, I have to sign the contract, but I can't because I'm not licensed architect. So I decided to work together with Sakakida, who was a young guy, my son's age, but he has a license. So we started this small architecture office, and then we are still doing it.
Yeah, you've since created a Nora Observatory, and
yes,
you're now working on the Hirshhorn Museum garden.
Right. Yes, that's the government job. That's a pain in the ass. Well, I don't want
Well,
to get
the Smithsonian
deep.
certainly does have its bureaucracy, and it is on the National Mall. So
National Mall, and it's been 8 years. I make my plan, and there's a movement against me. I don't know, it's a national mall because my nationality is not American. There's many things and pay respect to the original Banshaft design. There's other people, yes, against my project. So there was a debate for many, many years. But fortunately, Washington Post and New York Times cited to me. So finally it's approved.
it's happening.
It's happening. Yeah, groundbreaking is happening this year.
That's great.
But I kept saying, if someone dislike me, please let me go. I don't want to work. And under this condition, I'm an artist. But once I stepped in, the program approved, and I cannot escape. But now I'm happy that it's finally happening.
You and I share an affinity for a specific work of architecture, the Katsura Imperial Villa, which I feel like is worth bringing up in this context. It's the 17th century villa in Kyoto. And I think from a time perspective, it's one of the most remarkable examples of architecture on Earth. Fastidiously maintained.
Yes.
And also, I think, in terms of understanding architectural history and its influence on modernism in so many ways.
Yes. Bruno Tauto came, and then he came by boat to get the Japan sea coast. But the next day, he traveled. There's a group of Japanese who planned to show him what's the best. And Japanese took him to the Katsura Villa, and he was so influenced. So he made a message to the modernists, to the European architect. So this was the beginning. And then this kind of simplicity and modernistic sense was already established in the early 17th century. So the Japanese are proud of the discovery of the modernist sensitivities in its history.
And just fast forwarding many, many years to the early 70s when you made New York your primary residence, I understand that you saw this Donald Judd exhibition that completely reshaped your mind around wanting to become an artist.
Right.
So
it's like a Bruno Tauto, the meeting Katsura Villa. It's the same things happened to me, my mind.
Yeah, and I see what you're building at Enora, and it makes me think of some of what Judd aspired to do in Texas with Marfa.
Marfa, yes. I've been there. I was invited to do my show once, even after his death, but I was quite impressed. And then, yes, that Judd Plywood box show changed my life. Yeah.
What are your hopes for Enora, say, 100 years from now? What do you see this being?
Well, I always say the target of completion is 5,000 years from now. How beautiful it can be as a ruin. So, like we look at the Pantheon and pyramid, and it's so beautiful. So I don't know who is be able to see it 5,000 years, whether our human beings still present here or not, but I don't care. Just imaginative ruins, that's my final vision for my Enola. And this is my last piece. I just keep making it till I die. And I try to spend all my cash to make this as beautiful as possible. So my idea is financial idea that I want to die with cash balance zero. I spend all my wealth to make another kind of art as my foundation.
It's architecture as not legacy necessarily, but a gift, a way of continuing your time.
Yes, and a gift to the people, left this world.
So in the time we have, I have two final subjects I wanted to ask you about. One is cooking, because I heard that you have a special relationship to cooking, and maybe it's a specific type of food.
Yes, well, particularly traditional Japanese, but I even published a cooking book. Japanese women's magazine is quite high-end culture magazine in Japan. There's no such things outside of Japan. I hide my name, and then supposedly there's a very small restaurant receiving only 4 guests, and then serve for the particular guest, reading the mind of the guest and fitting the sense of the aesthetics, and also the fitting to the IQ level as well. I make a recipe and take the picture of the food sometimes by myself. And then 6 pages every month. I contributed 3 years. And then finally, I showed up my face when I published this book. Well, sorry, it's me. But from the first, the presentation of the restaurant, sorry, we never announced the telephone number, the address. Our reservation is fully booked for the 100 years. So don't call me. Very highly snobbish restaurant, I imagined.
So it's an imaginary make-believe restaurant.
Yeah, imaginary make-believe restaurant.
What has this cooking time provided you?
I never trained as a professional, but I had 10 years of activities as antique dealer. From 1980 to 90, I had a store called Mingei on West Broadway, 398 West Broadway. It's near Spring Street. When the Soho was happening, that was just by accident. My wife started, but she couldn't carry it because of the baby, so I have to take it over. All of a sudden, I start going back and forth 4 times a year, Japan and the New York. And then within 5 years, the Metropolitan Museum became one of my biggest clients. So without no education of Japanese art history, I just trusted my eye, just something I found in the countryside of Japan, and so interesting. I bought hundreds of books to study, and then just presented to my client. And then Isamu Noguchi became the first big client. And then Donald Judd and Dan Flavin, they were so close friends. They always come to visit me. So I confess that you changed my mind. But he loves 15th, 6th century Negoro lacquerware. So I was looking for the lacquerware, particularly for him, particularly for Dan Flavin, like ceramics of 17th century. So I was quite the experience. And then what's happened is, if I go to Kyoto, for the top dealers, always welcome for the dinner, and very secret, nice restaurant here and there. I became very close friend of one of them, very small restaurant. So I learned all the recipes from him. Judd involved in antique dealership, and just so many unexpected things came to me. So
I love that. It goes back to Judd. Well, final question.
Yes.
Opera. I wanted to ask you about opera, because I know you sing opera, but also Japanese Noh theater is a big interest of yours. What is it about opera? How do you think about the time you've spent engaging in opera.
Engaging in opera, and opera Garnier is, the top of the top. And I never expect to be doing some kind of theater things, but it just happened. I was asked to do whatever you want, because of my Bunrak puppet show went to the Paris, and then the people saw this opera. It's a long story, but many people get involved, and then I was asked to do something interesting. It's an opera, but it's a ballet piece. So I decided to make a Noh theater concept. Noh theater is a kind of ballet.
Mm-hmm.
So contemporary dancers together with traditional Noh theater dancing teams. And then W.B. Yeats written the story. Yeats was quite heavily influenced by the story of Noh, because the Celtic myth is very similar to the Noh story. And toward the end of his life, he saw the first translated English text. And then, this is his last moment, his life, and he wrote this piece at the Hawk's Well. So this story performed in London first in the 19th century, but it came back to Japan and rewritten as a Noh play. This is circulating kind of a Japanese spiritual ghost story. So I think this is perfect to make it happen as an anniversary of 350s opera, not the Garnier, the opera theater, by Louis, I think, 14th started. And I was given this particular celebration moment of 350th anniversary is the first season, opening piece. What the burden. Why you give it to me? Give it to French, I said. So I'm really into the theater now. I don't know which way I go. And it started from photography, the architecture and cooking and theater.
Antiques.
Antique collections. Well, I don't know who I am.
I think we should end there. Thank you, Hiroshi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Extra thanks to our Season 9 presenting sponsor, L'École School of Jewelry Arts, which is supported by the Maison Van Cleef and our pals. A unique place for learning, L'École welcomes the general public to the world of jewelry through courses, talks, exhibitions, videos, books, and now its Voice of Jewels podcast. You can find out more about L'École at www.l'ecolevancleefarpels.com. That's www.lecolevanCleefarpels.com. And thank you for listening. You can find more episodes of Time Sensitive on our website, timesensitive.fm, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To keep up with our latest time-sensitive episodes and get behind-the-scenes updates, sign up for our newsletter at slowdown.media/newsletter. That's slowdown.media/newsletter. You can follow us on Instagram at slowdown.media. Our theme music was composed by Billy Martin. This episode was produced by Ramon Broza, Emily Jang, Mimi Hannon, Emily McDonald, and Johnny Simon.